The September morning air hit my face like ice water as I stepped through the iron gates of Riverside Psychiatric Hospital for the last time. 6 years, 2,190 days of my life, gone. I was 35 years old, and I'd lost my 20s to that place. The cab driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, probably wondering why I was crying while clutching a plastic bag containing everything I owned. I gave him the address I'd memorized during those endless nights. Lakewood Cemetery, West Entrance. Marcus had been dead for 7 years. 7 years since they found him in his hospital room with an empty bottle of pills beside him. 7 years since they ruled it suicide. And 7 years since I made the mistake of saying out loud that something didn't add up. The cemetery was quiet, exactly as I remembered it from the one time they'd let me attend his funeral under guard. My wrists had been restrained. My own sister had testified that I was dangerous. The memory made my chest tight. I found his headstone easily. The flowers I'd had delivered last week were still fresh, white roses against the gray granite. I knelt down, running my fingers over his name. Marcus Chen, beloved husband, taken too soon at 29 years old. "I'm out, baby," I whispered. "I'm finally out, and I'm going to prove what they did to you." A rustling sound made me look up. An elderly black man in a maintenance uniform stood about 10 feet away, holding a rake. He was staring at me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You're Maya Chen," he said. It wasn't a question. My throat went dry. "How do you know my name?" He glanced around the cemetery, then took a few steps closer. His hands were shaking. "I worked at Riverside, 32 years in the janitorial department. I was there the night your husband died." The world tilted. I grabbed Marcus's headstone for support. "What did you just say?" "I saw things that night." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Things that didn't match the official story. And then when you started asking questions, when you hired that lawyer and demanded an investigation, I watched them destroy you. They had you committed to shut you up, Mrs. Chen, and I've carried that guilt every single day since." I couldn't breathe. 6 years. 6 years they'd told me I was delusional, that my grief had twisted my memories, that I'd invented a conspiracy where none existed. They'd pumped me full of medications until I couldn't think straight, locked me in isolation when I refused to admit I was wrong. "Why are you telling me this now?" My voice came out harsh, broken. "Because I'm dying." He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. I can't meet my maker carrying this weight." "Your husband didn't kill himself, Mrs. Chen. Dr. Whitmore, his psychiatrist, gave him the wrong medication, deliberately. I saw the bottles. I saw him switch them." The paper in his hand trembled as he held it out to me. It was a key. Old, brass, worn smooth. "There's a storage room in the old wing of Riverside," he said. "Building C, basement level. They're demolishing it in 3 weeks. I kept copies of everything, medical records, medication logs, even security footage from that night. It's all there. But you need to hurry." Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing behind a mausoleum. I stood there, the key burning against my palm, my husband's grave at my feet, and 7 years of rage threatening to consume me whole. The next morning, I sat in the shabby apartment I'd rented with the last of my money, staring at that key. My hands hadn't stopped shaking since yesterday. Part of me wondered if this was another delusion, if the medications had permanently damaged my brain, if I was about to spiral into another episode that would land me right back in Riverside. But the key was real, solid, cold. I picked up my phone, the cheap prepaid one I'd bought at the gas station, and dialed the only number I'd memorized besides my sister's. Teresa's Diner. My sister's voice, bright and cheerful for the morning customers. "Tessa, it's me." A long silence. Then, "Quieter, Maya? I need to see you. It's about Marcus." "Maya, please don't start this again," the doctor said. "I'm not crazy." I forced the words through gritted teeth. "And I need you to believe me. Just this once." Another pause. "I'm working until 3. There's a park on 5th Street. I can meet you there at 3:30. I spent the hours until then pacing my tiny apartment, practicing what I'd say. How do you tell someone that you're not insane when they signed papers declaring you legally incompetent? How do you ask for help from someone who testified against you? Tessa was already waiting when I arrived, sitting on a bench away from the playground. She looked older than I remembered, 33 now, with gray streaks in her hair that hadn't been there 6 years ago. "You look good," she said softly, as I sat down. "Better than last time I saw you." "You mean when you visited me twice in 6 years?" She flinched. "That's not fair. They said visits would set back your progress." "They lied about a lot of things, Tessa." I pulled out the key. "Someone approached me yesterday, a janitor who worked at Riverside. He said Marcus didn't kill himself. He said Dr. Whitmore gave him the wrong medication on purpose, and then had me committed when I started asking questions." Tessa's face went pale. "Maya, he gave me this. Said there's evidence hidden in a storage room. They're demolishing the building in 3 weeks." My sister looked away, and something in her expression made my stomach drop. "You knew," I whispered. "Oh my God, Tessa, you knew." "No, I didn't know about Marcus, I swear." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "But the commitment, Maya, they paid me. Dr. Whitmore's lawyer offered me $50,000 to testify that you were having delusions, that you were becoming violent, that you needed to be institutionalized for your own safety." The world stopped. Everything around us, the children laughing on the swings, the joggers on the path, the birds singing in the trees, all of it faded into white noise. Sophie needed surgery. Tessa was sobbing now. My baby was 8 years old and they said the tumor would kill her without treatment. Insurance wouldn't cover it. I was drowning in medical bills. They knew that. They came to me with papers already drawn up and a cashier's check. They said it was temporary, that you'd get the help you needed, that you'd be out in a few months once you accepted treatment. 6 years, I said flatly. I was in there for 6 years, Tessa. They tied me down. They injected me with drugs that made me forget my own name. They put me in solitary confinement for weeks at a time. And you sold me out for money. I'm sorry. God, Maya, I'm so sorry. Sophie is alive and healthy, and every single day I look at her and hate myself for what I did to you. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to hit her. I wanted to walk away and never speak to her again. But instead, I heard myself say, "Is Sophie really okay?" Tessa nodded, wiping her face. "Then help me now. Help me prove what they did. Help me make sure no one else gets destroyed the way I was." My sister looked at me for a long moment, then took a shaky breath. "What do you need?" 2 days later, we stood outside Building C of the Riverside Psychiatric Hospital complex at 2 a.m. The fence was marked with demolition warnings and hazard signs. Tessa had brought bolt cutters from her ex-husband's garage. Her hands were steadier than mine as she cut through the chain link. "I can't believe I'm doing this," she muttered. "You owe me 6 years. This is a start." The building was dark, gutted, waiting for its final destruction. Our flashlights cut through the darkness as we found the basement stairs. The air smelled of mold and decay. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. The storage room was exactly where the janitor had said it would be. The key turned smoothly in the lock, and the door swung open to reveal stacks of boxes, all labeled with dates and patient numbers. "How do we even know what we're looking for?" Tessa asked. "Patient 4847. My number. Burned into my memory. And anything with Marcus's name. It took us 3 hours to find them. 3 boxes marked with my patient number, and one marked Chen M. Deceased. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the first box. Inside were medical records, but not the ones I'd seen during my commitment. These were the real ones. Dr. Whitmore's handwritten notes, documenting everything. His observations that I was coherent and rational but persistent in her delusions regarding medical malpractice. His recommendations to increase my dosage to prevent her from convincing other staff members. His notes about my lawyer's visits. Patient continues to maintain narrative of conspiracy, recommend restricting outside contact. But Marcus's box was worse. So much worse. There were medication logs showing that on the night of his death, someone had signed out Elavil from the pharmacy using a forged signature. The security footage, transferred to a thumb drive, showed Dr. Whitmore entering Marcus's room at 11:47 p.m. Marcus had been admitted for mild anxiety and depression after losing his job. He was supposed to be on a low dose of Zoloft. The toxicology report showed massive amounts of amitriptyline in his system, a tricyclic antidepressant that in high doses causes cardiac arrest. But the official report submitted to the medical examiner listed only Zoloft. There were 3 other cases in Marcus's box, 3 other patients who died at Riverside under Dr. Whitmore's care, all ruled suicide or natural causes. All with families who'd asked questions. One woman's mother had hired a lawyer. She'd been paid a settlement and signed an NDA. Another man's brother had threatened to go to the press. He'd been arrested on a DUI charge the next week, lost his job, and disappeared. "He's killing people," Tessa whispered. "Oh my God, Maya. He's been killing people and covering it up for years." I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the evidence of my husband's murder, proof that I'd been sane all along, that everything they'd done to me had been to silence the truth. Tessa pulled out her phone. "We need to call the police right now." "No." I grabbed her wrist. "Not yet. We don't know who he's paid off. The police, the medical examiner, the judges who signed my commitment papers. We need everything documented first. We need to make copies, get it to people he can't touch." "Then who?" I thought for a moment. "The FBI. Medical fraud. Wrongful death. Conspiracy. This is federal. And journalists. Multiple outlets, all at once. Make it too big to bury." We spent the rest of the night photographing every document, uploading everything to cloud storage, emailing encrypted files to every major news outlet I could find. By the time the sun came up, my evidence was scattered across the internet, impossible to erase. Then I made one more call. "Dr. Whitmore's office. How may I help you?" My voice was steady. "This is Maya Chen. I need to schedule an emergency session with Dr. Whitmore today. Tell him it's urgent. Tell him I'm having a crisis and I need to see him immediately." There was a pause. "Mrs. Chen, I don't think that's appropriate given your history. Tell him I know about Marcus. Tell him I'm coming to his office at noon today, with or without an appointment. He'll want to see me." I hung up. "Maya, what are you doing?" Tessa asked. "Giving him a chance to confess. On record." I held up my phone. "I'm going to record everything. This is crazy. He could hurt you. He could have you committed again. He can try. But in 6 hours, every news station in the country will have the evidence. In 6 hours, he won't have any power left." Dr. Whitmore's office was exactly as I remembered it. Expensive furniture, framed degrees on the walls, a leather couch where I'd sat dozens of times before Marcus died, trying to support my husband through his depression. The same couch where I'd sat again after his death, sobbing, asking why no one could explain the inconsistencies in his death. Dr. Whitmore looked older. Grayer. He stood when I entered, and I saw the flash of fear in his eyes before he masked it with professional concern. "Maya, I heard you were released. I'm so glad you're doing well. Don't." My voice was ice. "Don't pretend you care about my well-being. We both know you destroyed my life to cover up what you did to Marcus." His expression hardened. "You're having another episode. Please, sit down. Let me call your caseworker." I found the storage room in Building C. I watched his face go white. I found everything. The real medical records, the medication logs, the security footage. "I know you murdered my husband, and I know you had me committed to silence me." For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then he sank into his chair. "Who else knows?" he asked quietly. "Does it matter? It's over. In a few hours, federal agents will be here. Every news outlet in the country has the evidence. You can't make this disappear. You don't understand." His voice was hollow. "Marcus wasn't supposed to die. It was a mistake. I'd been supplementing my income for years, taking payments from pharmaceutical companies to prescribe certain medications to patients. Marcus was supposed to get a higher dose of an antidepressant they wanted me to test, but I mixed up the bottles. I gave him amitriptyline instead, and the dose was too high. By the time I realized what happened, he was already dying. So you covered it up." I panicked. I had debts, gambling debts. I couldn't afford to lose my license, to face a malpractice suit, so I made it look like suicide. And when you started asking questions, when you found inconsistencies, I had to protect myself by destroying me. I offered you money first, a settlement, but you refused. You wanted justice. You wouldn't let it go. His voice rose. You forced my hand, Maya. I had connections, favors I could call in. Getting you committed was supposed to discredit you. After a few months, with the right medication, you'd have given up. But you wouldn't break. Year after year, you kept insisting you were right, that there was a conspiracy, so we kept you locked up. We? I leaned forward. Who else was involved? But before he could answer, the office door burst open. FBI agents in tactical gear flooded the room, weapons drawn. Behind them came a woman in a suit, holding up a badge. Dr. Richard Whitmore, you're under arrest for the murder of Marcus Chen and 3 other patients under your care, conspiracy to commit fraud, and multiple civil rights violations. She nodded at me. Mrs. Chen. Special Agent Rivera. We received your evidence package 2 hours ago. We've been building a case against Dr. Whitmore for medical fraud for 6 months, but we didn't have proof of the murders. You just gave us everything we needed. Dr. Whitmore lunged for his desk drawer, but agents were faster. They had him on the ground in seconds, his hands cuffed behind his back. Agent Rivera turned to me as they hauled him away. We'll need your full statement. And you should know, we've already arrested Judge Hendricks, who signed your commitment papers. Dr. Whitmore paid him over $200,000 over the past 6 years to keep you institutionalized. We're still tracking down everyone else involved in the conspiracy. My legs gave out. I sank onto that leather couch and started crying. Not pretty tears, but huge, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. Years of pain and rage and vindication all hitting at once. Tessa burst into the office moments later, wrapping her arms around me. It's over, she kept saying. Maya, it's over. You were right all along. The trial took 8 months. 8 months of testimony, of reliving every moment of my 6-year nightmare. But this time, people believed me. This time, I wasn't the crazy woman with delusions. I was the victim of a massive conspiracy, the brave whistleblower who'd refused to be silenced. Dr. Whitmore was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Judge Hendricks got 20 years. 3 orderlies who'd participated in my abuse, who'd restrained me unnecessarily and administered medications against my will, were convicted of assault and civil rights violations. The pharmaceutical company that had been paying Dr. Whitmore settled with me and the other victims' families for an undisclosed amount. It was enough to rebuild my life, enough to make sure I'd never have to worry about money again. But the money wasn't why I fought. It never was. On the 1-year anniversary of Dr. Whitmore's arrest, I stood at Marcus's grave again. This time, I wasn't alone. Tessa was with me, and her daughter Sophie, who was 15 now and healthy and beautiful. The janitor who'd given me the key had passed away 3 months after our meeting, but his family had come to the grave to thank me for giving him peace in his final days. And there were others. The families of the 3 other victims, people who'd thought their loved ones had died by suicide or natural causes, who now knew the truth. We'd formed a support group, started a foundation to advocate for patients' rights, to investigate suspicious deaths in psychiatric facilities. I'm sorry it took me 7 years to prove you were murdered, I whispered to Marcus's headstone. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, but I made sure no one else will die the way you did. I made sure your death meant something. The wind rustled through the trees, warm and gentle. For the first time since that terrible night 7 years ago, I felt something like peace. Tessa squeezed my hand. You did it, Maya. You got justice. No, I said softly. We got justice. You helped me when it mattered. Sophie's alive because of the choice you made, even if it was the wrong one at the time. And you came back. You helped me expose the truth. That's what matters. My sister started crying again. We'd had a lot of conversations over the past year, a lot of therapy sessions, a lot of difficult truths. Our relationship would never be what it was before, but we were building something new, something honest. I placed fresh roses on Marcus's grave, white ones like always, and stood back. Truth doesn't need permission to exist, I said, speaking to the families gathered around me, survivors of their own tragedies. It doesn't need you to be perfect or sane or believed. It just needs you to be brave enough to keep speaking it, even when the whole world tells you you're wrong. Even when they lock you up and medicate you and try to make you forget your own name, the truth is still true. And eventually, it will rise to the surface. Sophie, Tessa's daughter, slipped her hand into mine. Thank you for being brave, Aunt Maya. My mom told me everything you went through, everything she did, and you still forgave her. I looked down at this girl, this beautiful, alive girl, who existed because of terrible choices and impossible circumstances. Your mom made a mistake, but she made it out of love for you. And when it mattered, she helped me set things right. That's all any of us can do, Sophie. Make mistakes, ask forgiveness, and try to do better. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cemetery, we all stood together in silence. A community forged by tragedy, bound by survival, united by the simple truth that we'd refuse to be silenced. I thought about the woman I'd been at 29, newly widowed and searching for answers. The woman who'd been committed at 30, who'd spent 6 years being told she was insane. The woman who'd walked out of those gates at 35 with nothing but a plastic bag and a burning need for truth. And I thought about the woman I was now, at 36, scarred but standing, broken but healing, vindicated. The truth hadn't needed my sanity to be valid, it had only needed my courage, and in the end, that had been enough. As we walked away from Marcus's grave, Tessa's arm linked through mine, the families trailing behind us, sharing quiet conversations, I felt something I hadn't felt in 7 years. Hope. Not for justice already won, but for all the fights still ahead. For every person still trapped in a system that values silence over truth, for every family still wondering what really happened to their loved one, for every voice still waiting to be heard. My story was over, but the work was just beginning. And this time, I wasn't alone.